All right, welcome to the podcast. My name is Doug, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, and I'm a recovering sex addict. And this is episode 97, and it's one of our favorite things to do, getting to do a testimony. So it's really 97 part A. And if so, you just probably heard it from a couple episodes ago, how we do those part A's and part B's. So part A, we're going to really kind of look at some of the struggle, the addiction, the brokenness that's in lives, and then we'll move through that, and then we'll get to the end of part A. But then comes part B, the hope, the healing, the freedom, and kind of how that came about. So, Thomas, before we get started here, I just want to say welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much, Doug. It's great to be here.
I am super excited to have you on. I know we've spoken a couple times, and your story is going to be something that's really going to benefit a lot of guys, and so I just appreciate you being here. Before we jump out too far, I do want to apologize. In the last episode, I was speaking to Michael, who does our editing, and just said, "Hey, cut out this part," and it didn't get cut out; it stayed in there. So you can tell that we're all amateurs, and we do this in our own free time. So you get to see it raw and real. So sometimes you're going to hear that, and that's okay. George hasn't yet cut any of us a check, so we're doing this for free, and so I just appreciate your grace with some of those kind of things. And just to clarify, that was on me. I didn't tell Michael it was in there. I just said it in the podcast. I didn't let him know, like, hey, at 5 minutes, cut that out. So I just appreciate the work that he does, trying to make me sound as good as possible. And with that, we're going to jump out here into Thomas's story. I try to always start the same way and just let people kind of define themselves and whatever that looks like. So Thomas, tell me who you are, or how would you define yourself to the listeners out there?
Oh, well, my name's Thomas. About to turn 40 here in a couple of weeks. I have a beautiful wife. We've been married for 17 years, going on almost 18 years. 2 beautiful kids, a boy and a girl, and they're roughly 10 and 13. I live up in the Connecticut area. I am part of a local union up here, doing a couple of special projects for the union, and it's pretty much me in a nutshell for the most part. Just trying to live each day in God's glory and try to just express that and just share, His grace and His mercy for us,
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you reaching out. You were somebody that kind of reached out through Purity Podcast at Castimonia.org and just said, hey, I'd love to talk. And then through that became kind of like hey, I think I could tell my story. And just super glad you did, and just super excited to have this chance to kind of talk through this. So maybe before we jump out and start talking about your history and some of those kind of things, I'd love to know kind of what was on your heart that makes you want to be on the podcast or be willing to be on the podcast? What are some things that came to mind, like, I really want to share this, or I feel like this is what makes my story something people could connect with?
Well, it was, I listened to a couple of podcasts. I just randomly came across it in just pure hopes of just wasting time when I'm at work and working by myself. And I just typed in Purity Podcast out of the blue, and boom, there comes Castimonia. And since day one, I fell in love. I actually just finished the very last episode this afternoon, so I've officially completed listening to all of the podcasts. So, I think the main reason why I reached out is I just felt like my story was a little different. I don't think, I connected with a couple of people here and there, and I just felt that, maybe my story can maybe touch a person or two, and, kind of just touch them as well, just to kind of give them hope. As of today, I'm 78 days pure, free of pornographic material and masturbation. So, that's a huge win, but, every day is a battle, and, it's just your podcast, or Castimonia's podcast, is just phenomenal with resources. And, we always give God credit as number one credit, but, I believe that you guys are, top three up there as far as the resources and the things that you guys offer. So I just like how it's set up, and I like what you do. And for you, just keep up the good work, a little bit more, to help out the week to week. But, it's good. It's good.
That's awesome. Like, well, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. And congratulations on stringing together those days of sobriety. I mean, you're definitely in a zone that's kind of over that, 40, 45 day hurdle. And getting to that 90-day hurdle, those are, like you said, huge is the word for it. I mean, those are big. I remember thinking, there's no way I can go that long, like without, any type of, masturbation or pornography or any of that stuff. So it's doable. And so that's one of the things with these testimonies I think are so powerful, is guys getting to hear, whoa, there's guys with years. I didn't even know that was a thing, like possible. And so we're just, excited to be able to share some of that. So yeah, let's get into your story and talk about that a little bit. But we'd love to first just get a little background information on, what you want to share, kind of about how you were raised. What was your family of origin? Were you raised in a Christian environment, non-Christian environment, et cetera? And just kind of learn a little bit about that.
Sure. So the best bet is just start from the beginning. So I was born in 83 to my, obviously to my mom. About 2 weeks later, my mom basically showed up on my father's my grandma's doorstep, and just basically handed me over and just said, I can't deal with them right now. I have other things that are pretty much more important. So, so left, I don't want to say left on the doorstep, because, what comes to find out later on is that my grandparents were very loving to me, and were probably the best people in my life, for those couple of years that I had them. So I'm kind of grateful to God every day that he gave me them. So they're no longer with us. So it's like, it's one day we'll see them. So
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, definitely. So I think the first couple of years were great. My mom is a lesbian. So with that, in part, there's some time that's needed to still talk with her and try to have her open up a little bit more. We don't have the best relationship right now, and you guys will obviously see why. But there's a lot of questions and concerns. What I do know is that she handed me off with my grandparents. My dad was overseas serving the Army. He actually didn't know, just in relation to what he was doing and his contact with my grandma, he really didn't know that I was around until probably I was like a little over a year old. He already got married to my stepmom, meaning that he was just a side thing with my current mom. At some point that really doesn't make sense to me, and is a question, is that my mom was married during that time that I was born. So I think there was a little bit of infidelity going on in that relationship, unfortunately, meaning that a weird random thing happened. So I hold the last name of my mom's husband at the time, and she gave me that name for whatever reason. My dad holds a different last name, and my mom has a different last name. So it's kind of weird when you look at my birth certificate that all three people, me, my mom, and my dad, all have three different last names. And
right.
I've I've come to the conclusion that that's God's will, and that He set aside that to renew that with all the things that I went into, that I've experienced in my life, that I needed a name change. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be your first name. It could always be your last name. And, I'm coming to the grips that that's it. God gave me, my name change, just like he did for quite a few people in the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of going back into that a little bit. I mean, was there discongruent between like being raised with your grandparents and raised by your mother, and the life choices she's making? Was there discongruency between their views, or was that accepted, or like kind of how was that, or was that kind of unknown to you completely?
Looking into it, it was the 80s, so that was a very touchy subject. It was very hidden with my mom. She didn't really want people to know her lifestyle, and I think she just covered it up with both her husband and my dad at that particular time. So not a lot of people knew what she actually was. So I don't think my grandparents knew for a long time. In retrospect, they really didn't care, because I was there with them and they were taking care of me. So, that's all that they cared about, is that I was growing up under a household. They were non-Christians. I don't think they never went to church or anything like that. So, but I still felt like God worked in them to keep an eye on me, and just to be my guardian angels, I guess.
Yeah, so. For sure. And I was curious about that. Like you said, definitely the 80s not being accepted, some of those kind of things, and didn't know if, that kind of lends itself to the possibility of like you're kind of having to keep a family secret pretty early, when you're like, I don't even know why it's a secret, but it's a secret kind of thing, and didn't know if that was a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I kept that secret until, probably high school. So, that was most definitely when my mom was involved in anything of my life. It was always just normally her on a secret side. Her partners would come out and be part of my life as well. I don't want to take away that credit to them, because with what we'll get into later, is with all the abuse that I experienced, they ultimately were her partners ended up making sure that somebody was involved in my life, just to keep an eye on me. So
let's move into, I guess, some of that, and just kind of know like your upbringing, whether it's preschool, elementary, junior high, like what is some of that?
Sure. So from what I'm remember, and it's all like hit or miss sometimes, because I'll like be doing something and then you just get a flashback of something that it's just like, oh, I got to take care of that. But my dad came back probably after 2 years of me being at my grandparents' house. He came back from overseas with my stepmom. He probably had a few hours, 3-4 hours time with me, and holding me and just enjoying me, I guess. As his first son, basically. And then through a mutual friend of my mom and my dad, my mom just out of the blue came, and what I was told, was very pissed off and basically just took me. So not being, grandparents didn't hear from her. They said she sent some money here and there sometimes, which wasn't really needed. But they said that she wasn't really around or talking, or trying to figure out where I was, or how I was doing. So once that happened, I would just immediately be taken with my mom. Probably fast forward to what I can sort of remember. There's times in preschool that I found myself acting out in weird ways. I've gotten in trouble a few times for, looking under a teacher's dress type of deal, and not really sure why, but just that curious factor of me, and and then just going home and just either getting beaten, with the belt, or experiencing other issues in regards to the way that she would punish me. So, I don't know. I kind of lost your question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that was right on. I mean, definitely, there's a lot in there to kind of pull out. Sounds like some elements of physical abuse were a piece of that. Was that true? Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of during that time. There's what I mostly remember a lot of the bad times. There wasn't times of like celebrating birthdays. I think I remember one birthday party that we had, but for the other amounts of time, it was my mom worked, so it's not like she wasn't making a living, but her choices were elsewhere. If it was just partying with her partners, or if she was drinking or doing any of that stuff, I would experience a lot of abuse. I mean, one thing that was, we lived in a house, a 3-bedroom house, and I tell everybody I was probably the only kid that I knew that had 2 bedrooms, and one bedroom stored my bed and all of my toys and whatever I had, clothes and stuff like that. And then the other bedroom was the bedroom that I would be in trouble because they were tired of, grounding me and taking all my toys and throwing them in the other room. They just basically made that my room. So that room would have tinfoil on the windows that I wasn't allowed to touch. There's a bed maybe with, a pillow and a blanket, but for the most part, that was a locked bedroom door from the outside that I was stuck on the inside, from what I remember. A lot of abuse. My mom suffered. She was, still thinks that she's an alcoholic, and I was just that face that, for whatever reason would, whatever she was upset with or whatever, it would just turn out and just be on me. So sometimes I wonder about the abuse just in relation to that. Some people will be like, oh, he just got hit with a belt. Like, so did I. But, after reading a book about trying to figure out, my child abuse situation, it was most definitely, abuse in the aspect of anywhere from the lower back, mid back down to the back of my legs. At any given time. I remember her just wailing and wailing and wailing until, she's just tired enough just to see me and just slam the door and close me. So everything was always hidden from everybody, clothes and stuff like that. Wasn't allowed to talk about it. If I talked about it, then, that was another whooping. I think another wonderful punishment of hers is that I would stand in the corner, but unlike just regular standing, I'm holding books out to the side of me, with my arms stretched out, and got a lot of abuse in that aspect of, you drop them or do any of that other stuff, then that's a beating, and go forward with that. And
well, definitely that's awful to hear, and definitely even it's sad that you're like, I could go on all day about it, just knowing that this wasn't a single instance, or just something that you can vividly remember as being kind of a process. Like, you had a room that was much more than a timeout room. And just kind of pull out here for listeners that may be listening, it's really common for guys that enter recovery, or if you don't want to call it recovery and you just are like trying to get better, when guys just kind of start working on their junk a little bit, inevitably they're like, well, no, I didn't have any kind of abuse in my background. And so I know you can listen to this story and you're like, oh, that's clearly abuse. But there's so many types of abuse, and they're all playing in your story too. And I was just hearing those of neglect and of just so verbal and physical and emotional abuse that play out on so many different levels. And so, really, it's not a quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here that no one can see, but manly quality to say, I want to talk about, what this emotionally did to me as a man now, or as an adult now. But it's a really powerful tool to get that help to talk through what those things are, and to not discount it as like, well, I'm sure everybody, got hit when they were a kid. And I don't hear you doing that. I just wanted to pull that out for the listeners.
Absolutely.
Because definitely it's something there. And just, my heart goes out and breaks for that little boy that's trying to figure out life and being like, well, I guess this is just what happens in every household in America. You don't really have a way to know this isn't the way it should be.
Yeah, it took me a very, very long time to understand and decipher. Actually, I'm still figuring out things, from my childhood that wasn't right, and to mainly just to release it to the Lord. There's nothing I can do about it now. It's, if I let it attack me and eat me and stuff like that, it just puts me in a bad spot. So
right. I mean, definitely 100%. Like, I think that sometimes there's definitely a difference in like processing through something versus kind of dwelling on, and then letting it kind of eat you up. And so just really understanding kind of how to process that, lend forgiveness where it's possible. Those kind of things are hugely important. But of course, we can talk about that more and more. But would love to just kind of know, like, just kind of keep marching through your story here of like,
sure.
I know you talked about, some of the things that were happening when you were really early in school, and like, I'm curious, and some of that's natural curiosity. And then sometimes that starts to turn into where we can go back and start to see addictive behaviors or patterns. And so just curious, as you look back, what are some of those, stepping stones that you may see?
Yeah, I mean, now looking at it as an adult, some of the behavior is, you kind of wonder, but looking under a teacher's dress was one of those behaviors of, where's that, what is that stemming from? But, I'm not sure, but, it's always a start. I do remember that, what all started for me is probably around when I was 11, 12 years old. Just seems like the magic number for everybody. Yeah. That's when I was really introduced and, the pornographic material. In a way, one of my mother's partners was addicted to heroin, and she brought it in our house. And we ultimately, my mom, after a couple of months of just the substance being in our house, me seeing it, and she just kind of decided that she needed to get away. And that ultimately means that we just packed up our bags, ended up moving in with a friend of ours, and then, just living with her son in his bedroom and stuff like that. That's when, it all hit, was just basically like, hey, look at this movie that I found in the garage from my stepdad. And then it was like, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. Like, I kind of like that. What are they doing? I never was introduced to the male and female parts or what they were until that time. By the way, my mom came and picked me up from my grandparents' house. That was the last time I seen my father till I was roughly about 11. My grandparents moved to Florida, and he was living out there with them, not with them, but in the same city. So I would see him one more time, and then, that was it until I got married at the age of 19. So my father was never around at all, never contacted me never sent anything, like Christmas, birthdays, no cards, no communication whatsoever. So there was a disconnect there with my dad. So I never was fortunate enough to have that talk from my parents. I grew up in a household that was just female, and sexuality, obviously, of being, lesbianism and stuff like that, that it's just, that's how I thought it was, until, this friend of mine decided that, he would show me this video. And, then things just really started to click, then it was like, what's masturbation? And, then it's like, well, go try it and see what happens, and during that same time of watching the movie, then I acted out, and it was like, wow, this is amazing, this feeling, it's like, it takes away all that negative pressure that, me as a kid that I'm experiencing. So I automatically categorized that as a good thing and that I could always relate to. And, I snuck around and tried to find magazines and was very successful finding stuff in like trash and just being curious, neighbors' houses and stuff like that. And, just coming across the magazines and would steal them and take them home and hide them in the backyard and different places that, I know that my mom would never find. And that was a very, very bad time. That's when, the hormones in my body just started kicking off. And, instead of being introduced the correct way and the proper way of what, the male and the female bodies do together and what it's intended for by God, I was introduced the opposite way. So,
yeah. And, I probably pull this out every time, but just so curious as to how just everyone seems to know there's an element of wrongness about it. You're saying finding hiding places your mother didn't know about, or, watching this in the garage, and obviously at a time you knew was safe to watch there. And just kind of how there's a part of us, I think it's God in us and the Spirit in us that's convicting us even when really there was no reason you should have known it was wrong, except for just the Spirit in you, which is always a little interesting to me to some aspects. So I definitely see that clearly there. And I bring that up because I think, like I was asking earlier about kind of the secrets of your family and trying to keep that, secret about your mom's life choices and that kind of thing, that we carry that on into adulthood of just learning to, keep things secret and kind of just not sure what should be public knowledge and what shouldn't. So like always just feeling like, well, if it's something that is, maybe a sexual thought, then it becomes something I don't share. It's not something that's ever said out loud. And that becomes really just kind of even more darkness and more hidden. So there's definitely some patterns that get developed through that. And I just find that really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of weird because when this happened all in one day with the video and, going to the bathroom, obviously, and acting out, it was like I took it as it was a wonderful thing that was making me feel a lot better. I didn't question it as an aspect of a spiritual. It was my friend that told me, hey, this is wrong, this is bad. We can get in trouble for this. It wasn't until, maybe a couple of months after that, not after that, but, really quickly after that it was kind of like, maybe this is bad, and to start questioning it in regards to that connection with the Holy Spirit. Obviously I didn't know that then, but God's really good about putting on you when it's not right and it's not feeling right.
Right,
that's the Lord telling you.
Yeah, exactly.
Back up a little bit. So most definitely after, very, very quickly, it just turned into like, this isn't good, but it feels good. And it's my, my medicine from, the beatings and, puts me in a different mindset and, a different avenue, or they're, in that movie, or, in that magazine. And I needed to be someplace else in my mind, when I was going through those abuses.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look back, again, give yourself grace. Like, you're using whatever tool you can find to cope with things that are way beyond what someone of that age needs to be dealing with. So looking back, we can see that and have compassion for that. And I just think that's also a really beautiful thing. I've just heard a lot of guys' stories where when you start to go back, like, you can almost just say, well, what else what is he going to do? And I'm not trying to excuse behavior. That is not at all where I'm headed with that. Yeah. But just trying to give people the grace to know, like, hey, life is really hard for us as adults. I mean, here in my mid-40s, life's hard. Much less if I'm 6 or 12 or 15 trying to figure it out. So, it's a lot to take on. So just, again, kind of point out for listeners that are out there, just, giving grace to that. So yeah, just kind of keep going through there. But like, what was your junior high school experience overall? Like, how would you have classified that for you?
Good question. As in, around that time, we would experience junior high. Obviously, there's a next step to magazines and movies. In my life, it was to the next step of just acting out with another, person. I wanted to do that with another person. And I would lose my virginity when I was in 7th grade. And ultimately, that girl that I lost my virginity to at my friend's house on Sunday during church, which is a weird thing because our church was across the street. My friend's mom was huge in church, and we just went to church just to go hang out with the girls and youth group. And, I talked to one of my girlfriends at that time, and one thing led to another. And we ended up over at my friend's house. But, so I finally acted out, and that time it was wonderful. I enjoyed it, and it was like, I want more of it. But the problem is that I didn't know what was right and what was wrong. I would shortly after, this is kind of hard because I haven't, my wife is the only one that really knows this. So it's kind of like, hey, here Castimonia guys, here you go. Here's right. One that nobody knows yet, but isn't. It's full disclosure. So, there's only one way of freeing yourself is just to be open. But I would have relationships, sexual relationships with another guy when I was in 7th or 8th grade. It was a friend of mine, and one thing led to another, and we just started experimenting with each other, and it just started acting out more and more together, numerous times. And, in my mind, what I'm thinking about is that I'm getting my release, I'm getting my fulfillment because I don't have anything anywhere else. My mom's an alcoholic. She's not around. When she is around, I'm still getting beat and hit. I don't have this room anymore because, luckily the Lord gave us a 2-bedroom apartment. So, I have no more, second room to hide all my stuff. But, my attachment was, I don't want to be over there. So I would be at his house, and, one thing led to another, but, and obviously I would have this relationship, and we kept it secret for, a couple of months. And, it happened quite a bit. And I think, what pulled me away, I always questioned it. That was most definitely, now looking at it, it was the Holy Spirit that just set it on me that this is completely wrong. But I was so in depth into what the feeling gave me that we kept doing it. But one day it was all about me, and he wanted the return from it. And I didn't give it to him, and we got kind of in an argument when, and we're in 8th grade, so obviously whatever age that is, I can't think of it right now, but
right.
I ran into his bathroom and I locked the door. And in that process of locking the door, it's weird. His doorknob was on backwards, and he unscrewed the doorknob and was able to gain entry into the bathroom, and is trying to force himself on me. And he was a much bigger guy than I was, or kid than I was. I'm not, by all means, I was very small, or short and skinny, and probably you could see my bones because I hardly ever ate. And it took a lot for me to get him off of me, and from him forcing himself onto me. And that really scared me. Shortly after, his parents came home and, didn't know what we were doing. They obviously thought we were just kids playing around in the bathroom. And I went home. I asked to go home, and that was the last time that I talked to him. And that secret has been a secret ever since that day.
Well, that's a ton to carry. I mean, yeah, and I know, like, you were joking, like, well, they're here, I'll just tell it to all these listeners, but it's a lot to carry. And I just think so many of us carry secrets of shame that are just so strong, and we just don't know what to do with it, so we stuff it down in there. And it's just like, well, that's just something I'm going to carry to my grave, I guess, and move on. And just thinking about how heavy all of these secrets of shame are for all of us to just keep walking around carrying these giant bricks. It's really eye-opening when you see it like that. When you see, and this is true of everyone's story. We've all had things done where we're like, well, I'm not going to talk about that. And we don't for decades. But it's doing something to your emotional state for sure. I just thank you for your bravery in sharing that. And I definitely know that guys can connect with that, and just knowing that there's something that you did that you were feeling like, okay, this is wrong on several levels. And then adding to that, like not even being able to escape from it easily, and then having to move forward from that, of having no help or guidance with even what to do with it, but to just stuff it away and move on.
I just wanted to make a quick comment real quick. Is your listeners, you are probably hearing me smirkle a little bit and kind of laugh about a few things that are obviously very serious. But I've had a lot of help over the past years, and I'm still continuously getting help now. And, that's just how I'm able to release it to where it's not affecting me emotionally. It's a very serious subject for me. And, obviously there's probably listeners out there that they haven't dealt with that stuff yet. And we can get that on side B. But, for the most part right now, it's just one of those passive things that I do. Is just, it's just how I deal with it for right now. So I didn't want people to think that I'm making it a joke or, trying to make a funny out of it. So.
Definitely not. And there's definitely, it's definitely how a lot of us deal with stress, or just even an awkward situation of knowing what to do with that. But I mean, it also shows, exactly to your point, that there has been work done, that that there's the ability to talk about it, sometimes to laugh about it. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what was going on, but I think those can come from healthy places. But I appreciate you bringing that out for sure.
Definitely. Shall I continue with high school?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
So high school, it gets worse. No, I don't want to say it gets worse, but you're going through puberty, or you've gone through puberty. So now you're exploring the girls out there.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, I was going crazy, and at that point, my only out, I was a very shy kid, and didn't really express myself. So a lot of times it was like my only, I would see what was out there. I would enjoy what was out there, what the girls were wearing and all this other stuff, but I just took it home and continued to act out on it. I'm not sure what grade. I think I was probably like my sophomore, junior year. I got into a really long relationship with a girl that would ultimately be a huge learning factor for me, because I generated a closeness. I guess you could say that, your first love with her. And I think, man, we would practically have sex just about every day. And that's just the driving force of that year that we were together. And, what I thought was love was still more of a fulfillment for just me, and not understanding the other person, the other female that, I was destroying and ruining her life. We both would cut class, and, we would go to abandoned houses. I lived in California at the time, not the best of neighborhoods. So, we would find abandoned houses, and, we would spend our time there ditching school. I remember times of waking up at 3 a.m. just to, skate, rollerblade all the way to her house, which is like 4 or 5 miles away, just so I could get this fix of sex,
Yeah.
And then multiple times, a day. And it just like, after a while, it's just like, that's all she was there for. And I saw when we broke up, that just tore me apart, that I was missing that. I got so much from that relationship that I started to become obsessed. I stalked her. Guys she was with, I got numerous fights, and, would have fist fights with them at school. I acted out, for quite some time. I mean, I think her mom called me and basically threatened me that, she will call the cops if I don't stop. And, her and her boyfriend were both right there, and I was scared for my life because it was really bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was high school.
Yeah. I mean, you can hear so much in that. And I just think that I appreciate you bringing some of those things out of just as a high schooler, there's hormones, all those things, and just like trying to figure out, how do I deal with these? Like, okay, it's 3 a.m. I need to deal with it right now. Like, there's no delayed gratification. There's not even that. Like, it's just like, I need to figure this out now and soothe this feeling. And that creates a stronger pathway of that's the way it has to be done forever, is like, feel this, fix it, like immediately. And so that's also just kind of really interesting with that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess like post high school or that, like, what did that look like for you, and what were some elements of that? And
yeah. I don't know why I got my high school diploma. I did not do well in school at all, and managed to finish like middle of the class. But as a kid, the biggest victory came, and the most scariest day came was graduation. I went home. I was very blunt and very, very rude and upfront to my mom, and I told her, I don't live here anymore. And I grabbed my clothes and I left. And just like she left me at my grandparents' house, I left her on my graduation day. I went and moved in with a good friend of mine and his parents, and was there until they decided to move. I would get a job and generate some additional friendships, and that would turn into, when I was 19, I would invest in some property with a couple of other friends of mine into a house and lived there. So, being California, Southern California, not making a lot of money, surely had car payment and house payment, wasn't going very well. So obviously I had that stress. But on top of that, hey, I lived with other guys that were all the same age as me, and partying every weekend and being with whoever and doing with whoever, getting in fights and just being in that scene of like retaliation that I'm now free, but am I? So it was kind of like I was feeding my addiction, and I just didn't care. After being with that kid, that boy, when I was so young, it was blatantly obvious that I would continue just to be with women and seek out girls. So it was like, it was like a godsend in a way for me that I experienced that, because it just seemed and focused me just strictly on women, and it would just, I didn't care. I did not care if they were there, and they were interested, then it was a challenge. And I just, that's my mentality from like, until I met my wife, and even probably, in a way of like, I did do that to my wife. It was a challenge. Every girlfriend was a challenge. How quickly, when, where, and someplace new, how often, and how many. It was like, I had to feed this addiction that I had in a physical way. And if I didn't have it, well, I could just go buy movies or go buy magazines and just do and act out in that aspect. So yeah, I got married at a very young age, but in the process of the house, I just got to a point where I couldn't afford it anymore. So I moved into another friend's house, rent-free. She was actually one of my mom's partners, which now has been apart from my mom for many years. She brought me in, and she kind of helped me get back on track to basically save my life from all of that aspect of it, as far as acting out and just having someone stable and someone that loves me enough to just start introducing the facts of life. And so I was there for a couple of months, and then I was ready to go back out on my own. Found a random room for rent from a guy, and I'm like, all right, well, this is great. Everything was fine. That was in November. December, I would be calling the cops because he was accusing me of stealing out of his vehicle and causing this huge uproar to the point where I had to leave. It was not a very good scenario. He stole quite a bit of money from me, in the aspect of just showing that to the police that he set it all up to where, that he could keep my money and do all this other stuff. Another good friend of mine would save me, and I was always searching for a father figure, and it wasn't until a good friend of mine saved me. I had nothing. I was going to be living in my car at that point, and I called him up, and he just rescued me. At that time, he was going, maybe 6-7 months later, he would be going through a divorce. So that kind of hurt me, because I looked at them as like a mom and a dad, a successful mom and a dad, and very smart. And he took care of me, and he gave me what I was missing. During that time of that aspect, I would meet my wife. And, I don't know if you have any questions so far up to there before I go into the next.
No, it's been really,
my life.
eye-opening. Just kind of hearing that progression of where you're finding some rings of hope, and where you're finding stable people that can do that, and where you're seeking and seeing some of those things that are not stable. And so I think we can all connect to that of being younger, a young adult, and trying to figure out life and thinking, well, this is going to be good. I'm adulting here, and then it just turns sideways. But being able to recognize in that moment, that shows some maturity too. So even for younger people that are listening, life choices can be changed, and sometimes it doesn't take as much to do that than you think. Like, oh, I signed a 6-month lease. Well, that's okay. You'll live. Breaking a lease or those kind of things. So it's like, I think that there's some messages in that as well. But yeah, for sure. Let's hear kind of about, finding your wife, meeting your wife, that kind of thing.
Sure. Back in like 2014, and a weird, like I said, I just tried to look for girls left and right, and just to satisfy my needs. One night, this one girl, same age as me, my wife, but she was online. She's just basically, it was a Friday night, and we were like instant messaging each other online, and she's at home, and it's like a Saturday or Friday night or something like that. And so I'm like, oh, let's just meet up. And we ended up meeting up, and that probably was an interesting, life-changing thing. I think that was the first time that when I saw her, it was in an aspect of like, I want to take this serious for the first time in my life. I didn't want to use her for what I wanted. I didn't want to take advantage of her and start attacking her to be like sexual with me, like immediately,
Right.
But I want to say that didn't work. Not that I took advantage of her, but what I wanted to hold off on, ultimately it just happened and couldn't happen, So that next day, it's like we were together.
Yeah.
But what was different in a way is that we were always together. We never, for that year of being together, we never left each other's side, basically. So I got off work, she got off work, she was over at my house until 2 a.m, and then she's going home, and then copy, paste, and repeat, for a year or so. We get in trouble with her parents because not knowing what is right and wrong and how to treat, someone's daughter. I was an idiot, and I was allowing her to go home at 2-3 o'clock at night, and while I'm at home sleeping. And so, her dad was pretty pissed off at me, and we all had this come to Jesus moment that, this is how you're going to treat my daughter.
Right.
And it was scary, but I never told him this, but I respect him for that. Because I never treated anyone different than my wife. It was never for my addiction in a way of just trying to give me my sexual status back, but I was lost. I didn't know how to love her correctly until her dad sat down and was like, this is unacceptable. This is my daughter that you're just doing this to. And, that small talk in a way just changed my life with her.
Yeah. I mean, that's a powerful thing. And as a father with a daughter, that just to think of, I don't know if I can go down this road either, like how I treated women that are somebody else's daughter, and just the courage that he had to say, hey, you can, date my daughter, but this is how she needs to be treated, is a powerful thing that fathers can do. And I think our society, I've talked to a lot of dads about this recently, is scared to do that. Like, we're scared to be judged as whatever the male version of Karen is, right? We don't want to be the Karen that has to have that weird conversation with a teenage boy, that we're going to just let him honk from the driveway now, or text like, hey, I'm here, rather than just, no, we don't have to be rude. We don't have to have a shotgun in our hand, but to have a conversation of, this is what I expect my daughter to be treated. And I just think that's, something that we can, all of us with daughters, can kind of take as something to pray about, think about, and take some ownership in.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope I hope I could do that. I hope I can present myself like he presented himself to me, to my daughter. That's just a new prayer for me. But onward, forward, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So the closest people in my life were my grandparents, even though I really didn't see them that often. They left when I was 7 years old, and they moved to Florida. And by the way, I don't know if I said it, I was born and raised in Southern California, and so was my wife. And so my grandparents were in California, and at the age of 7, moved, and that devastated me, obviously, because now it just felt like they were so close to me in my outlet at such a young age, and they left. And they told me that was the hardest thing to do, because they knew that I was hurting, and that they knew that they needed to be in my life, but yet they couldn't sustain living in California at that time, that they decided to move to Florida for medical conditions, and for, obviously, money issues, not issues there, but it's hard to sustain California. It was tough for them to leave, and they just left it all up to God. That's what they told me. I would see them, throughout my life. I would get the benefit of being sent out. My grandparents would pay my way to fly out to Florida, and as much as it was difficult for them to pay that money those couple of times, they never once told me it was a burden, that it was always a special gift to live without something else, just to help me there. So,
yeah,
there was their 50th wedding anniversary, and I think me and my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, decided that I wanted to go celebrate with them. It's been I haven't seen my dad in a very long time, and I haven't seen my aunt since I was probably 5 years old, and so it was like a huge family reunion. So I went to Michelle and I said, hey, do you want to go with me? And she's basically like, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. Well, she's 19 and I'm 20. So next big step is to go talk to her parents about it. And surprisingly, after because we've only been together for about 7 months or so, and 7-8 months. And they were both like, yeah, sure, you're an adult. You guys, we saved up money, paid for it, and went out there. And, that would be the start of starting to plan our future, me and my wife. And, basically when we were out there, I think that was probably the coldest way that I've ever talked to her. And I basically already made up my mind that, hey, I'm really planning on leaving California, leaving everything behind, and just coming to Florida, move in with my grandparents to have them help me out for a little bit so I can get out on my feet. And just basically told her, you're more welcome to come, but I don't expect you to come. I think I was very cold to her and very, rude, and just really thought about myself. But, the invite was truly there for her. And to be honest to me, she's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Did not expect that. And then it was more of a, will you marry me type of moment. So that we knew that was the right thing to do, was just that in order for it to work, we would have to get married. So we just jumped in it, just right into it. And we came home. We had these huge plans. we were very young. We made up our mind on the flight home that we would drive to Vegas, and whoever wanted to be part of our marriage, great, let them drive themselves out there, and we could do that. And then it was a trip to a dump with her dad that I would ask for his daughter's hand in marriage, and ask for his permission, which is quite funny in a weird way. Like, I'm on the way to a nasty place to go help him, and I'm asking for his daughter's hand in marriage. So that was quite interesting. I know he wasn't happy with me, but he was okay with it. And at that point, to be mean, I didn't care. Was like, at this point, I'm in this for myself.
Yeah.
So,
and what did your wife know fully of your past and those kind of things?
Probably not until, that's a good question for her, but if I had to guess, I would assume that it wasn't until our marriage, like into our, couple, 3, maybe 4 years into our marriage, that maybe even a little bit longer, that I started to present this to her. She obviously knew the sexuality of my mom and who random people are, but she didn't know my addiction. She didn't know my acting out and pornography, addiction and issue. She didn't know about the emotional and physical abuse that I attained from my mom. She knew that she was, an alcoholic, that she drank a lot, but I kept my family away. It wasn't until I really introduced everybody, like, hey, this is my fiance, this is my family, and it was that Christmas. My family was just like, wow, are you guys sure? It's like, yeah, it's like nobody really noticed. My life, my personal side of my life was a complete secret, and, I only gave her, I would have told her if she asked, but that's not where we were. I don't know where she was physically at that moment, but I would assume that she was in the same spot as me. She just wanted to gather everything and just move. And
there's probably an element of that in every 20-year-old. Like, I want to, today to be day 0, and let's move forward. Like, we don't need to worry about the other things behind. And I think so that makes some sense on a lot of levels. I'm always a little curious, about what someone brings to the table in those relationships. And, I've shared in my story, I brought nothing to the table about that. Like, I told her I didn't struggle with anything when I did, and those kind of things. And so I think it's just, it's always a little interesting what people do know at the very beginning versus what they don't.
Sure. Yeah, most definitely. And, it wasn't, as far as my addictive personality during that time, she was fulfilling my need and what I needed in a loving way. So my acting out and masturbating was like dramatically not around. And, it was there, but, we were young, we were celebrating each other. We're celebrating this wonderful time of marriage, and we're leaving everybody. We're leaving family. We're leaving worry. We're leaving what we thought worry, and, all these problems that we had and that we generated. She had issues too that she just dropped, and we drove all the way across country that it would not follow us. And it probably worked for probably 2 days, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So then adulthood just kicked in right when we showed up in Florida. We managed. We had a little bit of help from her mom, which was wonderful. I'm very grateful for her side of the family, because they were always there to help us, and I think it was us. So it was instantly like I was connected. Like, I felt like there was there was hope. Like I belonged into the family per se. Like they're helping out and they're contributing to help us out to be a family. They gave me a chance when I needed one. And so 4 years after we got married, we would have my daughter, and I think that's when things would start changing into more of being more attracted to porn and masturbation. So, I want to say that I was never with another woman or man when I was with my wife, but infidelity is infidelity. It doesn't matter, if it's in person or if it's on paper or if it's on a movie, the sin is the sin. It's the same, regardless. And in that aspect, I just committing, a sin in her eyes. And we would finally find a church home. I would come to find out who Jesus was, but I still held out on my past and my addiction. I think at that point, we introduced porn into our relationship, and, we would kind of use that as an additional thing in our life, me and my wife, but then, it just tapered off, and, I would just do my own thing in that aspect of acting out in pornographic material. That would go on for quite some time. I would lose a job and end up back. We would end up back in California. My friend gave me a job and we started working there. And then, so a couple of years into California, it was starting to affect me. The issues of my childhood, my addiction by myself, we're talking like 7 years into our marriage, 8 years into our marriage. It's finally catching up to me. And so I was more distant from her. I wasn't open to her. I was closed. I was very, I would come home and I would immediately go into another room and I would be completely distant from her. I didn't respect her. I wasn't part of her life. I wasn't the husband that I needed to be. Ultimately, the way it acted out is that she cheated on me with 2 guys, and in the span of a weekend. And her best friend was getting married out in Massachusetts, and she's part of the wedding because it's her best friend, and so she was off. She went. I stayed home to do work, and she made a mistake. And then when we talked about it, and we've been open about it, with our pastor and stuff like that, in a way that it just came to a point where she just gave hope. She gave up on our marriage. She was already planning her exit route. At that point, we already had her son. And then she was also a surrogate during that aspect of life. And so in the middle of her surrogacy, that's when all this started happening. And, what comes to fruition, this is not like a step-by-step ordeal, but to go through those step-by-steps is what I mean. She was gone. She was in Massachusetts, and then I think I don't know, the Lord just slapped me, basically. There was something off. There was something completely off. There was something completely wrong. And I gave her a call, and I basically opened up to her. I said that, I just have this problem. It's continuous. This is the issue, blah, blah, blah. And, just started to really just open up to her. And I apologized profusely to her, and I told her, I need help. I need your help, and blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that I said, I just vomited up onto her. And in that she just broke down and she just started crying. And she's like, we'll talk about it when I get home. And, you know, and it was like, it was a nice relief for me, but I knew something was off. And after, you know, quite some time, you know, a couple of days later, something like that, I was nosy and, you know, she got a text message from this guy, and then that just all broke loose, and that started a huge. I'd find out that she cheated on me with 2 guys. It took me a lot of like being nosy and being in her space, and you know, going back to those actions of what I did with my first love, my first girlfriend, or however you want to put it, to where I instantly just, it was a light bulb that switched on, and it just was like attacking everything, you know, going through her phones, going through her accounts, just like going through everything, and just stalking her and kind of figuring out what was going on, because something wasn't right. And we sat down, and that's when she told me that, you know, hey, I was with, you know, this guy, and then with this guy, and then whatever the case may be. And then, you know, we just started talking about it. It was, you know, we tried to get counseling, and then we would bring up stuff in my past, and we'd bring up stuff in her past, and we just kept beating each other up in counseling. And I, you know, would just beat her up, not physically, but emotionally, you know, with our words. And our marriage was an atomic bomb that just blew up, basically. You know, she told me that once the surrogacy was over, that she's planning on leaving. You know, she's taking both the kids and all this other stuff because I was, you know, just not existent, not around. And, you know, that's, that's in process, changed me, that outlook. And then we can go on the B side. I'll explain how that changed me. But,
I think that there's a few things there that we'll be able to talk about within part B, although I kind of like the mixtape version of calling it the B side. I do like that. But like, this idea that what honesty can do, like, you know, I think of like all the times my wife found little things about maybe me acting out, and I would explain them away, lie them away, I guess is probably the real accurate way to say them. When really she just wanted the truth, because it was eating her away to know that there's something in there that I can't find. There's something in there I don't know. And as ugly as the truth was, it all had to be out on the table, and then it could be dealt with. And so, you know, again, that's a really kind of a part B type story, but a lot of times that's a really important thing, is coming to terms with the idea that, you know what, lying is difficult for you because you're holding it, but it's difficult for them too, because they know on some spiritual, emotional level, they're very aware, and it's driving them crazy to try to figure out, do I look at text, do I watch this and watch behavior and become a policeman or a bodyguard, or not, or, you know, like trying to figure things out and create rules. And that's a really difficult thing. But what kind of takes us from here to maybe the element of where part B will start? Let's just kind of go with that.
Yeah. So, you know, real quick, it just like, that opened up a lot of wounds. You know, we would end up moving out to Connecticut just to kind of just pack that up and just like, you know, California is just bad for us. Let's just leave everything there and just start all over. So we moved. We moved to Connecticut. A job picked me up instantly, just because of my skill set and what I'm capable of doing. So it was an easy transformation, you know, but we never settled it. We opened up this huge thing between us and our marriage, and we were still struggling. We were still, you know, getting into these arguments. We just didn't learn from each other. We weren't, you know, we set ground rules of like what we wanted to do to kind of just show her how much I was devoted to her, and then it just stopped. I went right back into, my depressed state of, the only thing that could fix it is, masturbation and pornographic material.
Yeah.
And then, so we would find a church fairly quickly once we moved in Connecticut. And I really felt like the Holy Spirit was very convicting on me and on my heart. And I can't lie, basically, is how I feel about it.
Right.
For the most part, that's to now. It got to a point where I used credit cards to purchase things. When I was out away from home, I would be in hotel rooms because that's where work would take me. So, I would go out to the porn shop, and it got to a point where I would just buy a whole bunch of magazines at one point. Then that turned into buying electronic devices such as Roku's or whatever that I could stream online videos. And I never got caught ever. I never, with my addiction, I believe I was very clever in the way I was hiding it, but my emotions and my face just told a different story. It's pretty much the story. There's a bunch of holes in it, but for the most part, it's there. Kind of give you an idea.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just, several elements of your story that just stood out to me. I brought out a few of them, but I know for our listeners, they will too. And just this idea of how people can be at wherever they are and look backward and go, how did I get here? And then sometimes just telling this story, however long this ends up being when we make it a podcast, but however many minutes this is, you can kind of go back in your own story and say, this is how you got there. You can, and it's interesting, and not because it excuses it, not because it gives you a free pass, but what it does is let you know where to start, maybe looking at some things. And so I'm sure as we talk about part B, when we do that will be a really big piece of that. So just thank you again for your heart and for sharing so much with us today.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you for, taking it on, just being here, just
Absolutely.
being here.
No, it's an honor to me. It feels, I just love it when people share their testimonies. I think it speaks to lots of guys, and we get emails from people that say that, that email us at Purity Podcast at Castimonia.org and say, hey, I heard so-and-so's testimony. Could they reach out to me? Because I connected with this part and I need to know what to do with that. And, we try to do that. So feel free to email us and let us know what you think of this testimony or other ones. But don't stop with part A. So we try to always do part A and a couple days later do part B. For most people that listen to podcasts, you can listen to them back to back within the same hour if you wanted. So they're usually back to back. So this will be 97A and there'll be a 97B. And just really don't listen to A without the B. That's just what I say. I just think that there's so much about addiction and recovery that can be hard. And so realizing that we're in community is a good thing. And sometimes this community is really big. It's in a lot of places we didn't know it was at. And that's sometimes a really good thing to know. And so maybe we never meet face to face, but knowing that we're walking together in recovery is a good thing for me. And so for our listeners out there, just know that you are on this road of recovery with us, and you are not alone.